My name is Val Connell, and I wanted to welcome you here to our Hack Your Resume workshop. Looking forward to hearing some information that might help us navigate the world of work and employment, particularly as it pertains to RCMP life. And, just kind of talking a little bit about how to maximize your chances of gaining employment and making it easy to kind of get back in, and also like what resumes and interviews are all about, and all kinds of information coming your way this evening. So I'd like to kick it off by introducing our guests tonight. We have Crystal Boudreau and Lisa Winberg of Altus Recruitment, and they're here to share a little bit of their expertise around employment. Crystal has more than 10 years of experience in the recruitment world, and she helps clients build their dream teams by locating specialized professionals and executives. And Lisa has more than 10 years of experience also in recruitment, and she's dedicated to helping people discover and pursue their passions. And so with that, we'd love to welcome you here tonight with us, and we hope that you enjoy and that it's informative. If at any time you have questions, please just drop them in the chat, and I will moderate questions and make sure that you get answers to those. Occasionally, we're going to drop some polls into your environment, and that will kind of allow us to customize and tailor the content of this and future presentations to better reflect your needs and desires, and your goals as well. So if you wouldn't mind, I've made sure that all those polls are anonymous, so your name won't identify with your response. We'll just take a look at the general overview. And of course, your feedback and comments are welcome in the chat as well, and don't hesitate to interact with us. Okay, so I guess I'll pass it over to Crystal.
Sure. Thanks, Val. Well, thanks everyone for being here. We're really excited to be here, and thanks, Val, for coordinating it all. And thanks to Lisa, who's also on maternity leave. So 2 months in, and I've already dragged her out to do something with me. So thank you, Lisa, my partner. So I started working with the National Police Federation probably about last October. And we've been helping them with a lot of their recruitment, and it's been really, really great. I mean, honestly, everyone that I've worked with so far with NPF, I feel like they're my longtime friend. And so, it's just a representation of, the entire community. So we're really excited to be here. RCMP has always been a big part of, my childhood as well. I mean, growing up in a very small town in Nova Scotia, that's, what we had, and they were very involved in our community. And yeah, so we're really excited for this opportunity to give back as well, too, in our small little way. So Lisa, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. Has to start off with someone being on mute.
It totally does. And I blame the fact that I am on mat leave. So that's fair that I can make that mistake in 2021. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. As Val mentioned, I have been in the talent acquisition recruitment space for a long time. And I guess you took that from my LinkedIn, because that's exactly what I like to say. I love to help people really understand and learn more about what they're passionate about and help them on that path to get there. I've been really lucky in my career to work with some really interesting companies in an advisory capacity. So I've seen, I would never say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot in terms of recruitment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'd love to share a little bit of that with you all tonight. So if Crystal just moves forward to the next slide, and then Crystal, can you close your Cisco phone? It's like blocking. Thank you. So what we're going to talk about tonight, it's actually not just going to be about resumes. We really firmly believe that before you start working on your resume, you really need to understand what it is you're really looking for, the psychology of the search, and we want to give you some advice that we hope will be helpful for you as you are navigating your career journeys. We spoke a little bit with Val, and some of you submitted questions ahead of time, so thank you for that. We really tried to incorporate that throughout tonight's presentation. So we'll hopefully get to anything that's on your mind, but we will leave time at the end for questions. So if you do think of something and it's a burning question, drop it in the chat, and if we can, we'll address it like right on the spot. If not, we'll take questions at the end. So kind of overview, we're going to start from the beginning and kind of work our way all the way through the job search. And so with that, let us jump in. So I can't see anybody right now, but so if we were doing this in a room together, I would say raise your hand. But if people, there we go. Can people respond? You know the little emojis at the bottom where there's reactions? Everybody go to the bottom of your screen, right-hand side where it says reactions. I'm going to ask, so give me a thumbs up if you have ever experienced any of the following. So 1, you applied for a job online and you never heard back. You applied for a job and got an email saying the position was no longer available within 24 hours of applying. You had a great interview and then got a rejection email with absolutely no feedback. You had a great interview and then never heard from the company again, or in 2021 terms, you were ghosted. Lastly, you applied for a job online, got rejected months later without ever actually moving forward for an interview. So I can't actually see any of these reactions, but I'm assuming that a lot of hands.
There's a few thumbs up.
Okay, a few thumbs up. The truth is, and the secret to let you all in on, is that it's really not you, it is the process. So depending on the type of job that you are looking at, recruiters can receive 200 resumes easily within the first 2 days of a job posting going up. So the average recruiter, and when I say recruiter here, I don't just mean like staffing firms, I mean HR within a company or hiring managers, but the people looking at resumes will spend on average about 7 seconds on a resume before they decide if they're going to reject or advance a candidate. So it's your responsibility as that job seeker to make it much easier for them to keep reading. You must tailor your resume to the posting and make it obvious that you're a good fit. And don't be afraid to follow up. So if we move to the next slide. So Val, this is a poll. I'm just curious to see if we pull this up. So why is interviewing for a job so stressful? So can people anonymously give us your, so I might get rejected. I'm nervous that they're not going to like me or my answers. I'm not qualified enough. I never know how to make myself stand out. It's awkward, all of the above or other. And if you want to share in the chat, go ahead. Okay, we're still waiting on a few people to answer. So Sarah, thank you for volunteering. Your answer is, I have a hard time because I'm not good at selling myself. We will get into that. And it's all about how you own your story and how you are able to kind of share your journey. But we'll talk about that a little bit in this workshop. All right, Val, can you close the poll now, please? All right, so the most common answer is all of the above. And then Haley, thank you. I get in my head because I don't know what questions they're going to ask. Totally fair. And again, we'll address that a little bit later on as well. So another little secret, if we move to the next slide, is, sorry, it's so stressful. And so I don't want to say but, because I don't want to take away from the fact that it is stressful, because yes, absolutely, a company is evaluating and judging you. But the number one tip that we want to give you, and if you walk away remembering nothing else, it's that you are in the driver's seat of your own search. As much as the company's evaluating you, you're also making a decision on whether you believe that you'd like to work with that company that you're interviewing with. And another tip there is that if you've made it to the interview stage, there is something on your resume or on your LinkedIn that makes you stand out, and it's up to you to help just confirm, help the company confirm that they were right in inviting you in for that interview. So we move to the next slide. So I like to always start everything I do, and all of the coaching that I do with candidates really is around starting with the why. So why are you looking? What is driving your search? So what are your main motivations? And this can vary greatly if you're currently working or if you're unemployed at the time of your search. So some common motivators we hear from people I mean, fundamental basic ones, I need money to pay my bills, support myself and my family. Other people might be looking for a new challenge, or, maybe they don't like their current manager or their company, their board. They want a bigger or smaller team, looking for more flexibility. I'd imagine many of you in your lives have had opportunities and experiences where you've had to move and relocate, and maybe you're looking for something starting from scratch in a new place, and that's a very different place to be in as well. So our tip here, and Crystal will follow up afterwards with an email kind of summarizing everything we're talking about, but we suggest that you create a list of your top 5 most important factors that you consider when you're looking for a new job. And in your mind, decide whether they are a must-have or a nice-to-have. And we'll move on the next slide. We're going to talk about creating a decision matrix to help you really evaluate all of the opportunities that you are considering. So really simple template you can make for yourself in Word or Excel. And you have your motivators across the top, and then the company and the role along the side. And so we're going to give you an example. So we're going to pretend, so for me, my pretend persona is, I'm currently an HR assistant at a mid-sized company. I've been in my entry-level role for the past 2.5 years. I like my job, but I'm ready for more of a challenge, and it's clear there's not going to be any more room to grow in my current job. Also, my current commute is too long, and I'd like to find a new role with a company I see a future with, ideally less than 30 minutes from home. So if we go to the next slide, and this is overwhelming with text, so don't feel like you have to read it all, but you can see based on the little blurb, I plotted in my my decision criteria, or my motivators at the top. So the first one for me, most important must-have, was room to grow within the company, smart colleagues to learn from, the reputation of the company, flexible schedule, and then the last one, which is the nice to have, was that office location or commute, less than 30 minutes. So I've done this presentation. Oh no, can you stay there for a second? I've done this presentation before, and someone mentioned, they're like, I'm surprised that salary wasn't one of the main things, one of your main motivators on the top. And so the reason for that, and you can see, obviously salary is important, but all of them are salaries that are slightly above what this pretend person is making. So they were all acceptable, so I put them here. They're important to note, but they weren't kind of the make or break factors. So you read through it and you can see, the last column looks at the ranked list of the opportunities. And it's really helpful to do this because sometimes people kind of get caught up in the company that makes them an offer first is the one that they take, and totally makes sense. But if you are interviewing with multiple companies at the same time, or considering multiple opportunities, it's really important that you actually compare them to each other as well as to what's important to you, so that you know that you're objectively making a good decision here. Crystal, would you add anything to that explanation, or does that seem clear?
No, I think that that's really good. I think that, I also think that oftentimes what's good is to ask someone else, whether that be your partner or, someone else in your family, a really close friend, having kind of those open conversations and honest conversations, and being able to go back and forth with someone that you have trust in and that knows you really well can offer you really valuable insight, and sometimes look at things slightly different than you do as well too.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other piece too that's really important to look at is around like what you think is the most important. So sort of those must-haves versus the nice-to-haves, and really sticking true to that, because if you see here on this matrix, this example, this company in the middle here has the highest salary, which could be actually very appealing to somebody if they were not really holding true to comparing those variables. But if you actually look at both, like all of these opportunities, you'll see that if room to grow is their number one most important thing, it sort of seems like this one is the weakest choice. Talks about, company reputation is kind of mixed. Flexible schedule is great, like yes, but at the end of the day, when I was doing this, I said this is actually my last choice of all of them. And again, everyone's going to have different things written on the top. They're different motivators, and it will just be hopefully something that helps you as you're going through the interview process with multiple companies. So speaking of getting in the room for an interview, I think I'm going to pass the floor over to Crystal to talk a little bit about the resume.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So resumes, right? I mean, gosh, we could spend the whole hour talking just about resumes. I think that the biggest thing to think about with resumes is that it's really not one size fits all. They're going to be it's something very personal to you. There's not two resumes that are going to ever come across your eyes that are the exact same, and nor should they be, because they're truly a representation of you. And you want to take that opportunity to make your resume your own and tailor it to represent you and your experience. It's great always seeing if someone's, in communication and more on the creative side of things. It's nice to see kind of how that personality shows through their resume versus if your resume is something more short, sweet, and to the point. Again, it's kind of a little representation of you and your personality. So we're here to share a little bit of insight on our perspectives from being in the industry for as long as we have. And certainly it's not something that is, set in stone rules. There's always going to be someone that tells you their own view of resumes, and should it be 2 pages? Can it be 5? There's no black or white. So we're here to shed a little bit of light on that big gray area.
Though I would say
Yes.
5 pages, unless you have, yes, you're right, Crystal. I'm not, yes, there's no right or wrong, but there's a more right, I would say, in that category. But I'll let you get there. I'll let you get there first.
Yeah. And then the federal government clients would be arguing, being like, no, it has to be project based, 10 pages is okay. So yeah, there's always someone else on that corner.
Yeah.
Let's start with resume format. So, what should your resume include? Definitely your name and contact information, and make that very clear. So what does contact information mean these days? Certainly your email, your phone number, and make it somewhere where you're going to be accessible. Don't put a phone number that you rarely check, or do you have voicemail set up? If you don't have voicemail set up, it's a good idea to do so as you start applying for work, and make sure that you have a professional email address. I think that that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. It's really nice when you are responding and outreaching for someone that it's not, tinyflowerdancer19@hotmail.com. So if you can, create a new email that perhaps is your name, first and last name, or there's all kinds of different ways that you can go about it. You want to talk about your education and training. That should certainly be something that's very easy to see, and languages spoken. So certainly that's always something that you want to highlight. Your relevant experience, I always say it's best to put it in chronological order. So you want to have kind of at the very beginning, it's always nice to have a short kind of snapshot of your professional profile. So think about it as your little about me section. You want to have, about 1 to 2 lines on where you've been and, what you've been doing, where you want to go, sorry. Just that little blurb that can kind of entice the reader to keep going, because usually you're, of course, starting at the very top of the resume. So whatever's written in that very first component is really what's going to attract the reader to keep going. So make it very clear and concise. Where you've worked, of course, so you want to put the name of the company, the dates that you worked there. You don't have to be specific. I mean, if you were going back, let's say 5 years of experience, no one's expecting you to know the months that you worked there. As long as you can have the years that you worked there. If you do know the months, great. Sometimes where that's helpful is if you've had, shorter term contracts. Let's say you only work there, in 2019, but you worked there for 10 months. Well, in those cases, I would say it's really good to put the months that you worked there, because it shows that you were there for almost the full year. You want to put certainly what your job title was. And for anyone that's holding bilingual positions, it's actually really nice to put bilingual in front of your job title. So if you are a bilingual customer service representative, it's great to put that in there, because people are searching for specific job titles on the search engines that you're putting your resume on. And so Lisa will talk a little bit more about those later. And what you actually did, it's great to have a quick summary of what you've actually done in your position. What were your responsibilities and what were your accomplishments? I think that that's one thing that's often overlooked In a resume, people always talk a little bit about what they've done, and they kind of go back to their job description. Okay, what was I hired to do? What are my kind of key responsibilities? But it's really great to show a little bit of a snapshot of, what your accomplishments were and what you're most proud of. What we don't want to see on resumes, as a general rule of thumb at least, photos and really any images in general. I think it kind of takes away a little bit from your overall content and your whole life story. I mean, hobbies. Some people have hobbies sections, but it's not as much of what the employer is looking for. So sometimes it's, to me, a waste of space, because that is very prime real estate when you're looking at the resume. So try to think of it very specific and strategically on what you're placing on there. And think about it from the hiring manager's perspective, right? Whoever that reader is that you're sending it to, what are they looking for and what are they going to be wanting to read? Resume tools. There's tons of different things out there now, especially more than ever, of different resume templates that you can adapt to whatever your needs are in terms of building your resume. If you're looking at, redoing a resume and you haven't touched it in years, these would be really great areas to just look at. Everything from Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Canva. All of these would have different types of templates for you to use, but the biggest thing to keep in mind is that you still want to take that as your starting point and not your only point. You want to have that time to personalize it and make it something that is your own, because when you're only using that template and you're not really going anywhere besides that, it usually can stand out that, you haven't done a little bit more to it. So that's why that little personalized section at the beginning, which kind of talks about, your career objectives, perhaps what you're passionate about, what your motivators are in terms of your career, would be great for you to add in. Grammarly is huge. Certainly, make sure that you're spell checking, and Grammarly is great for, anything that you need. But that attention to detail is huge when it comes to your resume and just the overall formatting. We'll talk a little bit more about that. This one's kind of interesting. We actually were recently introduced to this from a colleague. So it's jobscan.co, and actually what it does is it's a website that you can actually go to, and you can scan your resume onto it. And what it does is it actually kind of allows you a couple of things. So you can actually compare it to the job posting that you're applying for. And it does kind of a scan to see, have you, put in the requirements, and kind of gives you a statistic on how close of a match it would be based on what your resume says. But it can also help you for recognizing what certain candidate application systems, the tracking systems that certain companies use to receive different applications through. It can kind of help you navigate, what's important and what would stand out to those specific types of systems. So it's pretty neat. It's something that you could play around with for sure. And again, just always think, right? Resumes are going to look very different to each individual, but also even within each industry or each skill of someone's professional career. So someone that's an administrative assistant is going to have a very different looking resume and perhaps a slightly different format than an actor, right? So keep that in mind and know that there's a lot of great resumes that, can fit different categories. So formatting tips. It's definitely okay. As Lisa said, it's great to have a one-page resume. I mean, it's great to have a two-page resume. You can go over, that one page, but use your space appropriately and really try to maximize your impact. So thinking that if the recruiter is only spending 7 seconds looking at that resume, if you have 4 pages, are they even getting to your 4th page? So no, you don't want to have anything that's important. Sometimes you'll see people with, they'll put their languages at the very bottom or their education. But again, if it's more than 2 pages, you might not even have a chance of that getting written or read, sorry. So put those kind of key points at the very top on the first page of your resume that you want to make sure are standing out and that are saying, okay, great, we're going to get you to keep reading. Use plain language and include data whenever possible if you're talking about any type of results. So if you were involved in any type of a sales position, it's great to talk about what your targets or any type of metrics were and if you met those. any types of goals or projects that you had specifically, again, that you achieved within your positions are always great to say. So just any type of statistic you can show is great. Make sure that it's easy to read, so that includes font and size. So you want to make sure that it's not something too, scripted where it's just, again, looks like a very formal writing that sometimes is a little bit hard to read on. So you just want to make it very clear for anybody that's reading. Be consistent in your tone. So this can mean a lot of things, whatever way that you're writing it, you want to follow that same suit throughout. However you're talking about that first job, you want to make it the exact same throughout your resume consistently. And sometimes I find where people make that mistake is they have a resume, and then you kind of just keep adding to it, right? You've had the same resume for however many years. As soon as you go to apply for a new job, you might add in the last experience that you had. But then sometimes you're not reading through the entire thing. You're just going in and adding that most recent bullet or experience at company ABC. And then all of a sudden you've decided to write, the last company experience one way, but everything else on your resume is written a different way. So take that time, read through your resume, from top to bottom, make sure it still reflects what you're trying to say and the message you're trying to portray, and that it's, very clear and consistent. We love using verbs, so action words, to start each new point of a description within your positions. It's just a really confident way to go about describing what you've done in each position, and it tends to keep you on track really well. Can't tell you enough, to match your LinkedIn profile as far as your job experiences, at least with respect to the company names and the dates that you worked there and your position titles. There's nothing worse than, an employer, we'd get a call from a client, and say, how come Olivia's resume says this and, her LinkedIn says this, what's going on? So sometimes it's just, an error, but again, it shows about, what is your attention to detail, and, you want to make sure that those things are aligned, that you're taking the time to go through that before you apply. If you've held multiple roles in one company, it's great to indicate the dates that were associated with each job title within there. And so growth within a company is great to see. It, always speaks a lot about the person that was promoted. And so just make sure to show those dates within there as well too. So just, the biggest thing is attention to detail within a resume is so key, guys. There's been so many times I can't even tell you that a client will say, you know what, we're not even exploring this candidate any further because there's way too many mistakes in their resume. And they just, regardless of the level of profession, this can come at director levels, this can come in customer service. So it happens at all levels, guys, but it's a big turnoff from employers as soon as they see that, because again, it's showing that this will be the same level of attention that you're giving to their job and, their company. So take that time, and if you can, get someone else to read it, send it to us. We'll be happy to read it. And don't be afraid to tailor a resume when you're making any type of a career shift, or if you're applying to maybe a new position in a new location. So I'm sure that, is happening to you guys quite a bit. So this is actually really great. Doing kind of a resume audit, so as you're, thinking about what the position is that you're going to be applying for, look at your current resume and then kind of go through these questions and ask yourself what the answers would be, and actually write them down. So it'll be kind of interesting. And again, this exercise, the same as the matrix, there's something about writing them down and then having them in front of you really helps you kind of prioritize. So what was I hired to do? So again, what were your main responsibilities? What were the skills required to do this job? So sometimes we kind of think, okay, I'm applying for one position, but how do I incorporate my experience from, teaching, and now I'm applying to an administrative assistant position. So thinking about, what you did, but also how it could relate to the position that you're applying to as well too, and trying to take out those skills and make them clear to, again, the reader. What accomplishments are you most proud of? This is always so nice to see, it shows a little bit about, again, your personality, because you're speaking about something that's very personal, not only what you did in that company, but what are you really proud of, and what were some low points during that job? What stood out to you as, ooh, that was, something that I will never forget, either a mistake that you made or, something, again, that, wasn't great for you, what didn't sit well. Why did you leave that job? And so from the resume audit, you'll be able to really identify the skills that you would like to continue to use in a new field in one color, and then the skills that you'd want to move away from in another color. And again, now it's written down. Now we're going a step further and color coding it. And then it's really interesting to kind of look at, how many are in one color, how many are in the other. You can focus on the skills and experience that could relate to the new field, and then really be able to adapt your resume accordingly for each position that you're applying for. So again, sometimes you might look at that teacher who's applying for admin and think, okay, wow, so many organizational skills, so much planning, how much is coming through, just by having to identify the answers to these questions can make it a lot easier and less daunting for how to start explaining that, to make sure that you are someone that they consider when you're applying for that admin position.
And I would just add to that really quickly, if you go back for a sec.
Yeah.
This exercise will also really help you in terms of quantifying your experience. So Crystal mentioned in the previous slide, wherever possible, include numbers, include, a goal attainment percentages, things like that. A lot of times I've interviewed people and we talk about, like, what were your key metrics? How were you evaluated? And they're like, honestly, it was like, did I do my work? Yes or no? And we have to kind of unpack that a little bit, because they said, I wouldn't be shocked. And again, I can't see people's faces, but a lot of people have been in experiences where they haven't really had like formal performance reviews. They, how do you know you're doing a good job? Well, I didn't get fired. So like that was the indication. So this can really help you sort of tease out little tidbits of information that can really help you stand out and force you to think about it in a different way. If you haven't been externally evaluated. So things like, maybe it's I delivered X project ahead of deadline, or I saved the company this much money, or I implemented a new process that helped XYZ. Like it really will help you think about it in a little bit of a different way. And it'll also help you talk about it to the person who said they don't know how to like sell their experience very well. This can help you sort of break it down into more manageable little pieces and really help you build that story. I saw a question come in about, so when you're unemployed or you left a position due to a move, at what point do you update your LinkedIn and what would you suggest? So honestly, I think a move is the perfect reason to be unemployed and to have a gap in your employment. So on LinkedIn, and we're going to get into the LinkedIn section in a moment. So I'll try to incorporate this answer into the next section. And if I don't, Crystal, hold me to it. We'll come back to it after we do that. So there are a lot of different ways to look for new jobs. If we go here, I think there's a poll here. I'm not sure. Val, was there a poll about which sites you use? Yes. Okay. So which of the following tools do you use most often when you're looking for a job? So LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Monster, Glassdoor, JobBank, all of the above.
We appreciate everybody who's answering the poll. I just
Yes,
want
thank
to
you.
remind you that everything's anonymous here. We're not attaching your name to any answers, and it just really does help us tailor the content to our community's needs. So if you could just answer that, if you need help, you could just PM me and I can give you a little quick tutorial on how to use that.
Oh, interesting. Somebody put, I have an updated LinkedIn, but I mostly check the company websites every weekend. All right, let's end the poll. And I will say that I wish we had asked this question before we put the slides together, but I will, because we actually, in other times that we've done this before, LinkedIn has been the most common, the most popular. So I'm going to share like a behind the scenes about LinkedIn, but it actually applies to Indeed and the other sites as well. But we can move a little bit faster over this. But just so you know, I'm going to minimize. Can we close the poll? I can't see the slides anymore. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so most employers and recruiters rely heavily on both paid advertisements and resume databases when they're sourcing candidates for their companies. So we actually recommend that people have a strong profile and or resume on a lot of on various different job boards, because you'll have the opportunity to be found passively a little bit more frequently and also to stand out amongst the crowd. So based on this group, it seems like Indeed is the most popular, but I know a number of people said all of the above, so probably LinkedIn, depending on the type of role you are interested in. If you don't currently have a LinkedIn profile, I would strongly suggest that you create one. And we definitely have some resources that can help you in terms of putting that profile together. But the other sites are similar in that they provide you with an opportunity to submit a resume for their resume database. And just again, so you all know, recruiting companies pay a lot of money to get access to these resume databases, which allows them to find great candidates without the candidates actually having to apply to the position. So having a really strong updated resume and updated LinkedIn profile really helps you become more discoverable. So if we move to the next page, so creating your profile. So again, this is for LinkedIn, but this I really do think applies to the others as well. So how to create your profile to ensure that you're getting noticed. So when you do create this profile, it's really important that you understand, and we're going to kind of lift the curtain and show you what we see as recruiters on the back end so that you really understand how they're doing these searches. So oftentimes when recruiters are using LinkedIn, they're doing searches based on keywords and other a little bit more advanced searches, but it's really important to include the following. So a profile summary, the about section, location, and we'll get to location and tips on when you are moving or intending to relocate, how to kind of work that to your advantage. Obviously, your work experience, education, if applicable, skills, and you'll note that we put a lot of stars next to skills. That's just, it's something that is a newer feature on LinkedIn that many people actually didn't realize matters. So again, we'll show you how that translates, but certainly if you don't know if you have skills on your LinkedIn, we encourage you to go check that out after this call. And then setting your status as open to work. So on the next thing, just so you know, when you're searching for jobs on LinkedIn, and this actually, almost all of this is the same on Indeed as well, but you can start searching jobs with keywords and then filter further with the following. So you can search based on when the ad was posted, experience level, job title. Some of the jobs will post information about the salary range and what you can expect. And some will also actually post activity for the job itself. So like how many applicants have been, how many people have applied, and it will show you also your connections relating to that job post. Okay, so this is the behind the scenes look at LinkedIn Recruiter. So we wanted to show you and give you a sense of how recruiters are using LinkedIn and also Indeed to find great candidates. So we will put in pretty basic, like really we're putting in what do we want. So we said we're looking for a job title. The position I'm pretending I'm hiring for is a human resource generalist. Also could include people who have the title of human resource specialist. Locations, I'm hiring in Toronto, so I put Toronto here. The skills, are are super important. So I don't want to see anybody who doesn't have recruiting listed here. Certainly I want to see people who have other skills, but recruiting is, the most important in my mind. Schools, all of that important stuff. So actually, location is really important. So you might be moving to a new location, and you haven't changed your location to reflect that new address. Strongly encourage you to do so. I've seen a lot of people try to get around that by saying, Ontario, and they just leave it at that. Because of the way the algorithms work in these search engines, you're not going to show up very high on the list at all if you don't match your location probably to the headquarters. This is changing a little bit in the sense that companies are more and more positions are becoming remote friendly or remote first even, but because of the algorithm, it doesn't matter. They're still going to show people who live closer first. So in terms of like that tip or that secret for you, strongly encourage you to put the location where you're looking for a job. And if you get a call about that opportunity, it's completely fair to say on the phone, I am moving, this is my plan, and no questions asked. Crystal can share her own experience with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
True story. It's when I first moved to Ottawa, well before I moved actually, I was living in Nova Scotia, saw the position with Altus, applied for it. I probably applied to it multiple times and I kept seeing it posted, kept applying. No one ever called me back, nothing, no response. And then my now husband, who is living in Ottawa, trying to get me to move there at the time, had said, no one's going to hire you, Crystal. They see Nova Scotia on there. You have a, 902 phone number. Like no employer is going to want to call you. Change it to my phone number, my address, reapply to that position, and I'm guaranteeing you it's going to change. I was like, come on, that's not going to work. Reapplied. 5 minutes later, I kid you not, guys, 5 minutes, and I got a call. And, the rest is history. But it's crazy that that location made such a difference,
Yeah.
So the same resume that was applying got that call. So
Yeah.
hasn't changed 10 years now.
Yeah. So this is similar for across the different sites, like this piece, but on the far right hand side, the spotlight section, this is unique to LinkedIn. So I wanted to share kind of one of the benefits of being active and engaged and having a strong network on LinkedIn is that it actually helps you when it comes to applying for jobs. So you can see here, one of the things is has company connections. So our numbers are very high because as a recruiting company, all of our colleagues and peers have a lot of connections because they've been recruiting for a long time. So these numbers would be lower for another company hiring, but just to kind of give you that insight, are more likely to respond. So this is something just to let you know that we really encourage you, even if somebody contacts you on LinkedIn with a role or an opportunity that you're not at all interested in, we really encourage you to still respond and acknowledge the message, because that will also give you preferential, badging on your LinkedIn profile on the back end as someone who's more likely to respond to a message. Open to work, certainly that's helpful. If you've applied to a job at that company in the past. And then the one that I think is really interesting and almost it's in one way it's the easiest, in another way it's a little challenging, but engaged with talent brand. So this would be if you have your eye on certain opportunities or certain companies, we encourage you to follow those companies on LinkedIn and engage with their content. Even something as simple as liking a post that they post, you are going to again show that you are interested and possibly engaged with that company, and they're more likely to reach out to you. So if we move on. I think we got a question that distracted me when it popped up. So when you have yourself set to open to work when you are employed, does this reflect badly? So it depends. You can set your privacy settings so that your own employer does not see that. I don't know if that's specifically, Sarah, what you're asking, but No, I don't think it does look badly. There's studies all the time. I don't want to like the stats are always changing, but it's usually over 50% of people who are employed are actively looking for a new opportunity at any given time. So I don't believe that it reflects badly, especially if your reasoning is that you're moving or you're relocating. That's not, no one can hold that against you. I feel like that's actually like a very good and easy conversation to have. So this is just, again, we blanked out any like identifying information for this person, but just again, so you know, when we do get our list of candidates that we see as recruiters, it's very condensed. It's all people see is your name, your title, or actually your tagline rather, your location, and then your past roles with just the title and the company and the years. So it doesn't actually give you the space. It doesn't, you're not able to write anything that gets seen until they decide to click on you. So it's really very important that if you have had maybe more unique job titles, we would encourage you on LinkedIn to put something a little bit more universally known. So for example, at our company, our reception team is known as first impression specialists, which I think is probably, I don't know of any other companies that have that title. I'm sure maybe they exist, but if I was coaching one of them, if they were looking for something different, I would encourage them to put more of a title that other companies would know. So if their role was more like an office manager or receptionist, to put that, because otherwise they would be not discovered or not ranked as highly in that regard. And then if you see here also spotlights, it shows if you're open to work, how many mutual connections you have with that person, and then activity. This refers to their activity with your company. So this person, when we did this search, had actually applied to 2 jobs with Altus or Excel in the past. And then if we like this file here would indicate that we actually already have a resume on file for them. All right, and then there was a question also in the chat about would you recommend having a generic resume for the databases? I think that yes. However, I would certainly encourage you, if there were specific positions on those sites that you're more interested in, I would upload the one that is more tailored to that type of position. So we can get more into that a little bit at the end. But I think, yeah, it's a little bit more work for everybody, but I would say, yes, you should have one standard kind of generic resume, but then for any position that you're applying to, we do recommend that you tailor it based on the posting.
Great. So let's talk about questions. I would say that this is kind of my favorite part about, the whole process. And Val can probably reference some of this, from our interactions together. It's been really fun. I would say that even over the last year and a half, we've seen a big change in, interview questions have always been really important to ask, but throughout this whole pandemic where everything has been shifted to virtual interviews, I think that employers are we're seeing them put even more emphasis on that interview portion because they're lacking the ability to read the same engagement of the candidates that they're interviewing because you're not in person. You're not getting to see, someone's handshake and body language and, their excitement and how early they arrived for the interview and sitting in your waiting room. So because your lack of that interview question component at the end becomes really your biggest opportunity to showcase, a little bit more about your engagement. I think that's number one. And it puts you in the driver's seat, So I'd say so often I have, asked clients at the end of an interview process where maybe they've interviewed, 3, 6 people. And when I ask them what stood out the most about the candidate that they're offering the position to, I've been pleasantly surprised that the very good people that can ask very strategic questions at the end are often the ones that are getting the positions. And what I mean by kind of, the strategic questions is making the question something very much that's going to make that person that you're asking, stop and think about something like, oh, I would like that, actually, I don't know that. Or again, it's just making you get in the driver's seat for a bit. And, I mean, they've been doing all the questions and most of the talking, and, they've been hearing from you, and now it's your opportunity to hear from them. So you can really use that portion of the interview to stand out for yourself. I mean, it gives such a great impression when you're asking great questions. And at the same time, sometimes it can be a little bit disappointing for that person that's not asking any questions. And I'd
Yeah.
say sometimes people get nervous at the end when they're like, "Oh, the interview said 45 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, and you're, 2 minutes shy from that time." And then they're just asking, "Do you have any questions?" And sometimes people think maybe they're just asking it to be nice, they're just asking it to kind of be routine, but, they don't want to go over time. I would say, don't ever think that, and take that opportunity, regardless if it means you're going to go over the time, because that's your time, that's your time to shine.
Yeah.
So,
I would just
yeah,
add,
go ahead.
as a hiring manager, I have been blown away by some questions that I've been asked, and ultimately hired somebody based on the strength of those questions. And
Hmm.
exactly as you said, on the flip side, um, been really disappointed by someone who interviewed pretty well, and then when it gets time for them to ask the question, they say, I think you actually addressed everything, or I spoke to somebody else in the process, and they answered my questions. To me, that's a huge missed opportunity to show their curiosity, their
Hmm.
real like interest and passion. And it was a true immediate turnoff. I was like, oh, okay, this is a missed opportunity for sure.
Hmm.
So I think I see that there is a question. Does it look bad to have questions written down to ask? I don't think so at all.
No.
I don't think it looks bad. I would encourage you to have those questions ahead of time, because
Hmm.
it shows that you've done your homework a little bit. And just to add to that, it could also be very nice to incorporate something that that person said in the interview, add to that question list. So it could be, oh, Crystal, you mentioned this when we were speaking. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Hmm.
Because that also shows your ability to think on your feet and to truly be curious about what's discussed.
Curious, and show that you're very attentive and you're being a very active listener, throughout that interview
Yeah.
process. So even sometimes the interviewers will kind of go off into a story depending on the question that they're asking. And so, sometimes they'll make a comment about something. So again, circling back to maybe one of those comments made is great, because that question can't be prepared ahead of time. So it's really something, again, that's showing how you work on the fly, your resourcefulness.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely agree with Lisa. Um, we have a couple of great questions, examples for you guys to use. And I would say, for me, I always think, okay, you want to have certain questions that you kind of have ready, available to you in kind of your tool belt when you're preparing for an interview, but try to be as intentional as possible for either that specific company or getting as specific to, the person. So we'll kind of go through a few of these examples, not all of them, but you can obviously read through them. One question that I actually really loved that's not on here, that was used recently with one of my clients, is they're a nonprofit and they were hiring for a program assistant position. And the person that got the job asked a question at the end that said, not to the main person that was interviewing. So there was 3 people on the panel, and they asked, not the manager, not the HR manager, but the team lead of the group. And they said, you've been in this position for 3 years now. I was curious to know which program you're most passionate about and why. And so again, they were kind of like, oh, I don't even know if I've ever stopped to think about it. What is my favorite program and why? And so it was just a really kind of heartfelt question. And they loved that it was directed not to, the key person doing most of the talking in the interview. So another question you could ask would be, I noticed on your website that one of your main objectives in 2021 is to enhance targeted clinical services. I'd love to hear about the team's specific contributions to this project. So again, something very specific that's showing that you were not only prepared for the interview, but you went above and beyond. You looked at the company's website and took kind of a specific interest, and again, are showing your curiosity towards something very specific on their site. You'll oftentimes as well get an employer ask you questions about their overall vision or mission statement. So
Hmm.
sometimes if that doesn't come up in an interview, but you've taken the time to look at it, ask them maybe about it. I read on your website, that your values talk about, X, Y, and Z. What, value do you identify with most, or what would you say is something that is most key to this team?
Mm-hmm. And something that we didn't actually put on here, but Crystal and I were speaking about, is that tailoring your questions to the person you're asking them to. So, if you do make it to, and many companies nowadays have multiple rounds of interviews, and if you are interviewing with very senior people, we would encourage you ask questions that are broad, ask questions about their vision and the strategy. And if you're meeting with somebody a bit more junior or more like in the weeds of the job, ask more technical questions. Really read the room. I wouldn't ask the CEO, about the benefits package at that point. That would not necessarily be a good use of your opportunity to have their ear. So it's kind of depending on the audience also. Really important.
Absolutely.
Okay, so follow up: when, why, and to whom. How do we deal with this? So follow up best.
Would you like me to launch the poll about the questions?
Oh, yes.
do
I
we
don't
have
remember
one?
what the poll was. Go ahead. I don't remember what the poll
It's going
was.
to be a surprise to you too. Here it comes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh. So
forgot
one
about this
is,
one.
do you feel confident in your ability to ask good questions in an interview? Yes, no, or I didn't know you should. Whoops, yes, we should have done this before. How many questions do you usually have prepared for any given interview? None. Help me. Well, we already did help, so hopefully those people we'll send you the slides afterwards.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, well, it looks like most people have responded. So no, overall, people don't really feel great about their ability to ask questions, and hopefully some of the ones that we shared with you will help. And then two, how many questions do you usually have prepared? Again, there's a lot of great resources out there. A site that I really love, that we'll include in our follow-up email, is the Muse. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with themuse.com, but they've got some really great resources and articles out there with this sort of content that you can check out. And they actually have different sections depending on what kind of job you're looking for. So that could be good. So in terms of follow-up best practice, we want to give you these tips that hopefully will help you A, stand out, and B, understand a little bit more about what happens in that time period after the interview takes place. So this is assuming, your resume looks great, you stand out, you get that interview. Whether it goes well or it doesn't go well, we always encourage you to send a thank you note after each interview. It seems small, but it's often a really clear distinguisher between candidates. So I call it a thank you note, but I do mean a thank you email. So keep it brief, or a LinkedIn message if you've been communicating in another channel, but keep it brief. Be sure to mention something that you spoke about in the interview, and make sure that you give a clear indication of why you're a great fit. It's an opportunity to once again sell yourself. So people always come to me saying, I don't know what's going on. I feel like the company's gone dark. Can I follow up? How do I follow up without looking too desperate and, losing the opportunity? So in the interview, we always encourage you to ask each interviewer for an estimated timeline regarding next steps. So whether that's in the interview, you could also ask if you are working with a recruiter, you can ask them what the expected timeline is, but certainly ask. If you don't ask, you're just going to drive yourself crazy not knowing what to expect. So let's say, we had an interview, and I was interviewing with the job with Crystal, and she told me, we expect that we'll be able to get back to everybody by Friday, I don't even know what day it is, Friday the 28th. So let's say we haven't heard back by that expected date. Really encourage you, reach out via email and ask for an update. Remain positive and show that you have ongoing interest in the role. Ask if they require any additional information from you. If they haven't responded to you after 1 week, I would send one more email at that point. If after another week you still haven't heard back, a general rule is that you should move on. Although, and there's so many reasons why companies do go dark, and I could honestly talk about that for an hour, but um, whatever the reason is, whether it's, genuinely they are just super swamped or they're just mean, like it doesn't matter at that point. They probably aren't ready to they're not ready to move forward with your candidacy, and it's better for you to focus on other opportunities at that point.
Especially with the no response back,
Yes, the no
I think that it's
response.
very different, if there's
Yeah,
someone updating you on the other end, telling you,
yeah,
even at any point of those follow-ups where they say, you know what, thanks so much for checking in, we're still, or there's been a delay. If you're getting any type of an update that there's just some type of delay on the other end, then it might be okay to keep going. But with
yeah,
nothing,
yeah. I can't remember, Crystal. Can you go to the next slide? I don't remember
mhm,
if we cut out why they might not be getting back to you. Oh
mhm,
yeah, it is. Okay, I didn't cut this out. So why is a company ghosting me? What did I do wrong? So the short answer is that unfortunately it's impossible to know exactly, but most of the time it has nothing to do with you. And I just want that to sink in for a minute. So your interviews are probably your number one priority right now when you're thinking about your professional life. Um, but interviewing is just one part of the long list of things that companies are working on. So, with that in mind, here are some reasons why a company might be unresponsive. So, first of all, other internal priorities come up, and the hiring manager, the recruiter, the other decision makers haven't even been able to get together to debrief after the interviews. That happens all the time. There might have been a delay with scheduling another candidate, and until all interviews are done, the company isn't willing to make a decision about you either way. The role may have been temporarily put on hold. That happens all the time. This one is probably the one that like would sting the most, but is that they may have made an offer to somebody else and they're waiting to see if their first choice candidate accepts the role. If that person declines, the company wants to be able to move on to the next candidate and offer it to them without them knowing that they're the runner up. So, like Crystal said, all of these are valid. They're legitimate reasons why a company could be a bit slow in responding, but the red flag, so the red flag is not it's taking a long time to make a decision, it's that they're not communicating about what's
mhm.
going on. And so that's just something to keep in mind. um oh, thank you, Val. I'm
Way to
sorry.
go, Val.
Sleep deprived, as Crystal said. I have a 9-week-old baby. I'm so sorry
No,
about
I
that.
hope I didn't prematurely deploy it. It just
No. This is good. So, what's the hardest part about following up for a role? So, I don't know how to do it without sounding desperate. I feel like I shouldn't have to. I don't want to bother people. I didn't know I should, or other.
And again, I would say that this follow-up is like, I think of it in the same category as those interview questions. It's like that one added area where you get to showcase a little bit. It's like Lisa said, to sell yourself that one last time, and whenever the hiring managers or recruiters are identifying, kind of how they're ranking these candidates, okay, they're thinking about your whole interview, but then they're also thinking about, what questions did they ask? How did,
Yeah.
that interview end? And then, hey, what was their follow-up? What was the timeliness of the follow-up? Did someone send the email follow-up within the first hour of their interview wrapping up? Did they wait 2 days to send it? So that whole package is so you want to be able to make sure that
Hmm.
you're taking those opportunities any chance that you can, because
Yeah.
otherwise others are doing it and you don't want them to score extra points than you.
Yeah, and I agree. Someone just put in the chat, I think it's a question about how you choose to word it and how do you, stay professional.
Hmm.
And totally agree. And I also think the other piece too is, and this is a bit of a gamble, but my the coach in me wants to say, put yourself in the driver's seat and really leverage other things that you have going on. So if this is
Hmm.
a position that you're really interested in, but other companies are moving faster or you have other opportunities, it's completely fair to say, I wanted to check in, as maybe you've mentioned or maybe you didn't, but as if you have, let's say, as I mentioned, I am interviewing it with other opportunities. Yours is my top choice, so I would love to have more information before moving forward with something else. That puts a little bit of pressure on them, positive pressure, because it's showing, what, like, Crystal's in demand. I don't want to, I don't want to miss out on her because I'm too slow. That's often a way of avoiding that. I don't know how to do it without sounding desperate. That is a way. It's sort of like, I am a hot commodity and I'm interested in you, but just so you know, other people are interested in me also. It's all about that psychology.
And I think just not overthinking it. Sometimes we're spending so much time thinking, okay, what do I say? What, is it too long? Am I not saying enough? But yeah, just the act in itself is great to see, but they're going to view the same things that they would on a resume. They're looking at the overall, spell check, on your email. Are you sending it just quickly from your phone? There's nothing wrong with that, but just make sure that there's no, typos when you're sending it, and just keep it short. Thank them for taking the time to meet with you. Maybe tell them what you enjoyed about the interview. What were you surprised by something? What did you love learning about? What excited you? How did you feel leaving there? You could say something like, again, thank you so much, Val, for taking the time to meet with me. I was really excited to have the opportunity to learn more about your team and the work that you do. Sounds very meaningful. I would, love the opportunity to join your team. And I think that I would bring a lot of value because of my previous experience in XYZ. Would love to further the conversation. Hope to hear from you soon. It doesn't have to be anything super long or formal.
Yeah. And then I added this slide in here because I think it's so important to mention that once you hear that you didn't get a job, how you react can also be very important and make a huge difference for an opportunity. So, if a company does let you know via email, it's really important that you remain positive, thank that person for their time. And I always encourage people to ask if they're willing or able to share feedback. They might not be. A lot of companies will not share interview feedback for a lot of different reasons, but certainly worth asking. Show that you're professional and mature. You never know when or if you might have the opportunity to work together again. I once had the best colleague, one of the best colleagues I've ever had. She applied for a role when she was still she was finishing a certificate in HR, and she applied for a role. This is a long time ago now. I was at Scotiabank at the time. She applied for a role and we did not select her. And we had a great conversation. I was actually able to give her feedback, but I was just so impressed with the level of maturity that she displayed. She really showed that she wanted to learn. She was very coachable. I ended up mentoring her just sort of personally and professionally. And then a few years later, I had a role on my team at my next company, and her name immediately came to mind. So it was something, that I was able to, because of how she responded and how well she took that rejection and showed how much she wanted to learn, was able to hire her. And she's now, she's done an incredible she's done an incredible job in building her career since then. So reflect on that experience and try to identify what you've learned and how you might approach things differently. And then channel that disappointment into something more productive. Take a walk, clear your head, go do something else that you enjoy. Take the rest of the day off. Don't, feel super discouraged and be like, okay, I'm going to go apply for 10 more jobs today. That's not the best approach there. Sarah asked in the chat, what do you suggest if the company's not willing to provide any feedback? I think it's unfortunate, but at that point you sort of have to cut your losses, because you can really, I don't know, you can really go into a dark hole for yourself if you just keep nitpicking. I wonder why they didn't like me or why they didn't pick me. It ultimately probably came down to the fact that there was somebody else who had more of the qualifications that they were looking for. It often might not actually be anything to do with you. It might have been, the boss decided to save money and divide the work amongst two people on the team, and they would never tell you that, right? And that has really nothing to do with you. So I think it would come down to being really reflective on yourself and kind of evaluating your performance in those interviews, in those conversations. And if there was something that you felt, you didn't answer well, try to work on that for the next time. We didn't have time to get into it in this workshop today, but we have a whole resource that we can share with you about the types of questions you can expect to get in an interview. One thing I would encourage everybody to practice, and I wish we don't know enough about what everybody here, what kind of roles you are looking for, but very common type of interview questions would be behavioral interview questions. And those you really can practice for because it's all about you and your own experiences. And the truth is there's really not that many different ones that companies like to ask. So again, you could do a quick Google search on that of behavioral interview questions and just really work
I'm going
on
to
that.
include a follow-up on that too with some really
Yeah.
good ones.
Perfect. Yeah, we have a whole handout on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think with that, what is the deal with recruiters, Crystal?
So yeah, I mean, I think that we wanted to talk, of course, about if you did choose to partner with a staffing firm, kind of what that looks like and what to expect. And I think as a follow-up to what Lisa was talking about sometimes not getting any of that feedback, I'd say that's one of the things that we most commonly hear of, an advantage to working with a staffing firm is that candidates love the feedback and kind of that constant communication that they get throughout the process, right? So, oftentimes our clients are sharing a little tidbit about, what was their feedback on the interview so that we can share that openly with the candidate. Maybe they are, referencing one area that they would have wanted to see more in. But often it even can just shed a little bit of light on, oh, they went with another candidate, but this is what the candidate had that you didn't. This was kind of that deciding factor. They had previous experience in the industry of the company that they're applying for, or sometimes it's something that comes out throughout an interview that the clients themselves weren't even expecting. Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, actually they talked about their experience in, this database, and this is exactly the database that we're moving into. So we're, jumping on the opportunity to have someone on our team that's used it before, but no one was even aware of this, coming into the interviews. So sometimes it can be something really uncontrollable. So as far as working with a staffing firm, we certainly want you to know it's, really important. We're always very transparent, but we're paid by the employers. So if you ever register, with Altus or anyone else, you should never be asked for payment from a recruiter. So whenever clients are paying us for what we do, it's a percentage of the salary, well, for permanent placements at least. And that's never something that, a common misconception that we hear often is, oh, if I'm working with a staffing firm, they take a cut of my salary. That's not how it works. If Val calls me and says there's a position vacant with the NPF, they tell me what the salary of the position is, and then we tell them what the fee would be, what that percentage is based on that salary range. So if the salary is, 45,000, then when we're calling you, it's 45,000. There's nothing that's taken away from your salary. So I think that that's really important to know. And when you're working with a staffing firm, it's really important for them to be kind of aware of what you're looking for, and you want to have as open of a relationship as possible with them. So I always love, I think, again, hearing from candidates that sometimes we're calling them about positions that is with a company that they're very interested in, but they didn't even see posted, so I'll always get that surprise, like, oh my gosh, I actually love the Red Cross, but I don't even see this position posted on their website. I'm on there every day. Sometimes people don't realize that we have such great relationships with some organizations that we take on, we alleviate that whole recruitment process from them. So sometimes it's positions that they're not even recruiting on their own. So this would be truly an opportunity to get those, positions that you wouldn't have access to on your own. So that's something that's, a big advantage. In most recruitment firms, there can be multiple recruiters or account managers, and they will not have knowledge of all open opportunities. So if you see something that's of interest to you, definitely reach out to them. So again, a constant reminder that you're in the driver's seat. If you are, let's say, interested in a position that you saw on, the staffing firm's website, we always say, it's best to apply directly to that position. Any way that it works within a company is usually whoever you're applying for with that specific position, it's going to be going, sending that application to whoever's in charge of that position. So it's getting to the right person right away. Certainly there's no harm in, let's just say you interviewed with Lisa, you want to send Lisa an email and say, Lisa, I just applied to this position. I'm super excited. Can you tell me anything more? Can you put a good word in for me? It's always great if there's an opportunity number, which in most cases there always is. If you can reference that, it makes it really easy for a recruiter to look up that position. Because again, if there's 180 people in our company, we can't be aware of all the different positions that everyone has posted. And again, just being very transparent, honesty is the best policy when it comes to that relationship with the recruiter. So you want to tell them what's going to work for you when you're looking for work, and what you're looking for. Again, what are those motivators? And not only for the salary. We find the best, most successful positions and the matches that we make are when we can really identify outside of salary, what those key motivators are, and find it within, again, thinking back to your matrix. Okay, well, if I know that, you're coming in for an interview, Lisa, and you say, I do want to find somewhere where I can grow within the company, or, I need that open relationship with, my current employer that I'm going to be looking at next, because right now I don't feel supported, or maybe again, there's changes going on that you don't want to see recreated in the next place. So it's very important for us to be aware so that we're doing that pre-screening for you and making sure that whatever we contact you with, that it does align with what you're looking for. So some best practices, you definitely, again, want to be very upfront with what you're looking for. So are you open to relocation? Are you open to, different types of positions? What types of companies or industries are you open to working with? Salary, of course, is a huge factor. You want to be able to make sure to be coming in with the right types of opportunities. For a lot of people, sometimes the compensation package as far as benefits is really important if they have a family, vacation, flexibility in terms of hours. So you want to definitely leverage your recruiter as your biggest champion. You want to share as much information with them because they're ultimately going to bat for you. They're going to be the ones telling their clients about you. They're going to be the ones that whatever impression that you make and however best of a picture that you can paint to them, it creates that lasting memory, and it makes it really easy for them when they do have that job available, again, to think of you and really align you with what's going to be a good match for you. So don't be shy, overshare. It's better to share too much information as far as your, career path and what's important to you, and let them know where you're at with other positions. So most often a good recruiter will ask you these questions, but it's always great to share that with them if they're not asked. So,
And I would
go
just
ahead.
also add in there that as recruiters, like we understand that your number one priority is getting a job. It's not getting a job with us as, your own kind of agent. So I've had candidates in the past feel, and I learned my lesson, so it hasn't happened in a really long time, but have candidates be interviewing elsewhere and not tell me, and then ultimately take a job somewhere else. And then when we have the conversation, like, well, I just felt so bad. I didn't want to disappoint you.
Yeah.
So, and I said,
down.
yeah. And then this one person, it was a really interesting conversation. They were like, it's sad though, because the opportunity that you had presented me for was actually my top choice, but this other company moved faster. And I was like, okay, like light bulb moment for me. If I had known that, I would have been able to advocate on that person's behalf and get them that opportunity. And ultimately it was that was like a very pivotal moment for me very early in my career, which was I told the client, they came back literally like 20 minutes after this candidate and I got off the phone. The client came back and they were like, okay, we'd like to move forward with this person. And it was just heartbreaking, but essentially, just so you know, we understand, recruiters get that you're interviewing with other firms. That's okay. Go, like, you have to, again, put yourself in the driver's seat. You're your own number one priority. So just be as upfront as you can and really advocate for what you want, and they'll help you.
And it's just so helpful. Whenever I ask those questions, but again, if we forget, it's great to be forthcoming with that. Whenever you say, hey, I do have these other 2 interviews lined up for next week, just as an FYI, it's nice to kind of, rank them again in your order of interest. But then it also is really helpful from the recruiter standpoint, because if I know you're interviewing 2 other places, I'm going to be calling my client, you can bet you, that same day, and being like, hey, FYI, this person is interviewing. You've got to move quick if you do want to consider them. So sometimes it's really helpful because it pushes, the clients in the right direction. And if they're sitting on something, sometimes it gives them the push that they need. So it's very, very helpful for us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at, oh, perfect. We're
Yeah.
at questions. I'm looking at the clock. Oh, okay. We're just curious to know. Have you ever applied to a role through a recruitment firm? Interesting. Okay. So,
Yeah.
well, all
Wow.
right. The majority, no. That's very interesting. The majority who answered. All right. Well, that's another avenue to pursue. So, in the interest of time, we want to make sure that we do have time to answer your questions. So happy to actually, maybe Crystal, we can stop sharing the screen. And
Yeah.
if people wanted to, some people have had their cameras on, which is great. If you want to ask a question live, jump in, or if there's questions in the chat.
One question in the chat: the positions I'm applying for, I have experience in. However, my experience was from a job over 10 years ago, and I've been in a different industry since. Does that time in between make or break it?
I would say no, but sometimes in those cases, I take that specific experience and I put it at the top. So if it's something that's dated 10 years ago and you have so many positions to get through, they might not be seeing it. So, you could put relevant experience at the top and talk about what's most relevant to the position you're applying for, and then categorize the rest of your experience still by date, but just underneath it, so that you're making sure that that experience comes to the top.
Yeah, I would also advise in that instance that if you are applying for a role directly and they ask for a cover letter, absolutely address it in there. We didn't even talk about cover letters at all today, or directly applying to a job, but it's really important, again, that you tell your own story. So maybe that's you're using some space on your LinkedIn summary profile section to say, I'm really passionate about this and I'm trying to get back into something. The other thing too, and again, Haley, like, we don't know enough about your experience and what you've been doing for the last 10 years. Just because you're in a different industry doesn't necessarily mean that what you've done is not applicable. So look for, again, when you do that resume audit and you see, what skills you've developed at each of these different roles, you can then share that, like highlight that information a little bit more clearly. Another question here: how far back do I go? Does it matter that I worked at I think that's Tim Hortons in high school? So I don't know where you're at in your career, how long ago high school was. I would say that if you've had more relevant work experience than that, it really depends on what the job is. But do you feel comfortable telling us, like, how far out, how long ago was high school for you that you were working at Tim's? Okay, well, we'll come back to that. But basically, I would say, if you're looking to get into a related type role, then you could. If not, then it doesn't need to be on there. Oh.
And some.
Okay, yeah, it should. Okay, so I was right. It should have been Tim Hortons 25 years ago. No, you don't need to put that on there if it's not relevant to what you've been doing.
One question that I think had came through in one of the questions that Val had sent was about references. So people had asked, what do we do if we don't have references, or, how do you stay in touch with references? So I think that again, no need to put references on your resume when you're applying to positions. We don't really see a whole lot of that anymore. Even not even bothering with the whole references available upon request. It's kind of an unwritten rule that if you're going to be asked for references, someone hopes that you do have some. So no need to waste the space, in our opinion, on the resume. But do have those prepared, and be aware that that's going to be usually one of the final stages of the application process. And you just want to be upfront and honest. If you haven't stayed in touch with references, or we know a lot of organizations now are saying that they're not doing references, that they'll just confirm the dates that you worked there. Just be honest about whatever the situation was and what can you provide. So to that next employer, could you look at maybe a volunteer experience where you've had a really good relationship with over the past few years? What can they talk about? Do you have maybe a former colleague that you stayed in touch with? Maybe they weren't a manager, but someone that could talk about the quality of your work and what you were involved in. Or maybe it was a client. Were you in a customer service or sales related position that you could talk about a client that you engaged with, so they could actually talk from a really interesting perspective, from the client side of things. So just look at it from whatever angle that you can. And if you are looking at applying for work, I would suggest to just stride and stay in touch with those people that you are, connected with in terms of references. So, just send them an email, or, give them a phone call or a text, a couple of times a year, and just make sure that you are still keeping them in line for any references that you get asked for.
Yeah. So 2 questions have come in that I'm really passionate and want to answer. So the first one was, how would I navigate an employment gap, brackets of longer duration, 3 or 5 years? I've been living in an isolated community without childcare for 2.5 years and headed to another. And then another question was, how do employers feel when your reason for leaving past jobs is because of your spouse's work? In my instance, RCMPs. So that is honestly it's a great reason to have been between professional work experience. And actually, LinkedIn has recently recognized how important the work that people are doing out of the quote unquote professional world and in parenting. And they've now added that as a profession, as a role that you could put on your resume, and to really put that in there. I think in the instance of, military spouses or police spouses, it's a wonderful reason, and people would be very receptive to that. Not only, if anyone's even a little bit patriotic, it's like, I'm serving my country in my way. This is how I'm contributing. So I think that certainly being upfront about that is great. It's also a little, when you have different locations on your resume. The question wasn't asked here, but somebody else asked a question about being not necessarily unemployed, but underemployed. So employed in a way that doesn't actually relate to someone's professional desires or experience, but maybe they were working retail or working in a restaurant just for money. It does tell a great story to be able to explain that. Follow-up question is, does it not cause potential employers to pause, wondering if you'll not be a long-term employee? I think that in 2021, something just that has evolved is that the average tenure, and every industry is slightly different, but 2 years, I apologize, I don't know how long the average post is with the RCMP. Val, how long? 2 years? 3 to 5?
5.
Oh, yeah. So I would not worry. A company can't, when they're hiring you today, they're probably thinking no more than 2 years out, because most companies are redoing their strategic plans all the time. They're evaluating, I don't want to say it's every quarter, because that's very tumultuous, but no company, very few companies today are interviewing you and saying, oh, I'm not going to hire Sarah because she's going to move in 5 years. That no one would expect that kind of commitment at this point. So I wouldn't worry.
It's almost impossible for anyone to ask for that type of level of commitment from anyone, regardless of their situation. So most people would not even know, if you ask people like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Most people don't even know, right? You have kind of a path, and but I would agree. I would say that, often it's not something, and especially when you are very open to talking about it, don't leave it as kind of an elephant in the room. Own it, and talk about it, and talk about it proudly, and say, you'll notice that, I have moved around quite a bit. Here's my story, and they loved hearing about that, and I think it shows a lot of versatility. People like that, it's giving you an awareness to different, exposures to different, again, companies, industries. What have you learned throughout those positions and those moving, that you did? So
Yeah, exactly. And it's also interesting, you've developed really interesting, diverse perspectives from the different places that you've lived and worked, and that really does bring something different to the table than someone who has, been born and raised in the same place and never kind of ventured outside of that.
I really think this is an interesting question, and one that came up a lot on the registration question field. And I think I'm really interested to hear that that's not something that employers consider, and also that I think so many members of the RCMP community come from a culture of work where commitments of X number of years are important and required. And not only that, you may not even be releasable from that position for X number of years, right? So interestingly enough, we may be stuck in a in a time eddy in some ways around what we think about employer expectations because of our community culture experience.
Yeah, well, something that I find really fascinating, especially, in the last however many months we've been in this COVID reality, so 15, 16, it feels like a long time. I grew a whole person in that period of time, but COVID has changed things. I will say that in some really terrible ways, but in some really wonderful ways as well, from the perspective of employers being more open to remote employees, or sorry, to not remote employees who are not located in the same, who are working remotely, who may never come to the office, and that's okay. I think that trend is going to continue. I don't believe that, I don't think we're going back to the old normal, in terms of people being expected. If the work culture was, you have to be in an office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 every week, and that's, no exceptions. I really think that companies are not going to be able to attract and retain great talent if they don't provide some flexibility to their employees. And that's really exciting, when we coach companies. So, part of my role is around coaching candidates, but also coaching companies on how to attract the best people and how to position themselves. If the role can be done, and we've proven so many jobs can be done from anywhere, that really opens companies' pools of candidates to great people that they never would have seen otherwise. And so I'm really excited. There's tons of content out there around, like, it's called the future of work, and this is something to me that's super exciting, because I think especially for people who, like many of you, who move around a lot or who aren't in major metropolitan areas, before, your opportunities were probably much more limited, but now with the internet and with the openness to having dispersed teams, it's a corny thing to say, but, like, the world is our oyster, and it's really exciting. I've never met Crystal, which is wild. I joined our company 10 days before the pandemic. Our CEO used to say, it's all your fault. You joined and then this happened. It was a joke, thankfully. But, I thankfully I did meet our CEO for my interview, but I was scheduled to go to Ottawa to meet the rest of the team the week after the world shut down. I think I still have a credit for Air Canada on our corporate account, but it's very doable. I feel like I know you well, but I haven't,
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot that
And
can
even a
be
quick
done.
stat on that, when I had a look, we looked at from January of this year up to date, how many of our permanent positions that we've staffed with our clients are 100% remote, and it was 61%. So really interesting, right? I mean, the data is not perfect, so it's, you know, what our clients are telling us right now. So there are some organizations that have said 100% remote with no intention to go back to a physical space.
Yeah.
And then others have said they're just not sure yet. So, I mean, whether that full 61% will ever be in an office, that's a little bit harder to say. But for the most part, again, we're hearing a lot more companies are just so open to the possibilities. So again, it's really refreshing, and it's very helpful for, you know, you being in this situation. That how fun would that be, you know, to be able to take your job wherever you go, right? It's amazing.
Yeah. A question coming in about volunteer experience. How much does that matter to employers? The answer would be it depends on the employer. It depends on the type of position. It depends on where you're at in terms of your how far advanced you are in your career. So, and I would also say it's great that if you do have volunteer experience and you have volunteer work, absolutely talk about it. I think that it really shows that you have a passion for something. You're able to develop skills that you might not have developed elsewhere. I always tell, and I, again, Lee, I don't know how senior or junior you are in your career, but I find that volunteer work, certainly when you're earlier in your career, is amazing to talk about. You're able to draw on that experience that you wouldn't have gotten in a paid professional type role. But even people who are more senior, it shows, again, you know, your dedication to something, your ability to give back and prioritize community involvement, whatever that is. And I think it really doesn't matter what type of volunteer work you do. It's just that you have, you know, you have a passion for something, you're committed to something outside of yourself and your professional work. And I think that that's really it stands out. It also makes you a little bit more interesting. So yeah.
And I think it's, yeah, one more chance to share your personality, and it can be one other way to connect with someone.
Yeah.
You know, there's been that point where, oh, hey, wow, I didn't realize that, you know, you were involved with Big Brothers, Big Sisters. You know, actually, I was too, you know, and it gives the interviewer that time to, you know, really connect on that level as well, too. So, yeah, it's been interesting to see what people pick out from that.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions? Okay, so we will follow up afterwards. Crystal will send out the notes. It looks like, Val, this is recording. So
Yeah.
if you want to
We'll send up any follow-up materials as well as the replay.
Probably be tomorrow, just if that's okay. We'll send it all. I'll make it all pretty and send it off to you guys tomorrow. Well, I'll send it to you, Val, and you can send it off to everyone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, guys. We really enjoyed this, and thank you to everyone for being so engaged, and your questions throughout and at the end were great. It's really, really helpful. And, you know, we'd encourage you, well, I'll encourage you, you know, certainly I'll include my contact information in the email that I'll send through Val. You know, connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free if you have any questions on your resume specifically. I'd be very open. I mean, we're a small group. I'd be very open to giving any feedback to you directly. So feel free if you'd want to share your resume with me. I'm happy to help you. Yeah, if there's any questions that you have that you thought of after the fact, feel free, you know, to send them our way too, and we'll do our best to answer them.
I just want to say thank you so much to Crystal and Lisa for your willingness to be here and to share your expert knowledge with us. I mean, it's important for spouses as a segment of the Canadian population who is chronically under or unemployed to have access to this kind of information. So we really, truly appreciate the effort and time you've put in here. And I want to say also thank you to the NPF for hosting this opportunity for our members and their families. And I know that, you know, there may be members who are looking at a transition out of the force, and this is good information for them as they kind of go back to civilian life, or kind of if they're looking for a different career. I know that this stuff is handy and important. So I do want to say thank you, and also to our participants for being here and engaging and taking the time out of your schedules to invest in yourself. I mean, just being here is a personal investment, and sometimes it's difficult because of scheduling and children and all kinds of other reasons, but I'm grateful that you took the time to show up here for yourself and also for one another, because the more we come together around topics of interest, the more encouragement that we spread within our community. And it really does make a difference in the lives of other people to see you here and for you to participate and engage in these kinds of conversations. So thank you to everybody, and we really appreciate your time, and we look forward to hearing your feedback and follow-up questions to this session. And again, if you have any other questions or concerns, you're welcome to, we'll provide our presenters contact information, but you're also welcome to reach out to me at any time for suggestions or feedback or whatever else you might need. So thanks everybody. I hope you guys have a great evening.
Thanks everyone.
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Everybody. Good luck.
Bye, everyone.